Hey, welcome to the Football Outsiders live stream and podcast for Tuesday, July 26, 2022. I am Aaron Schatz, the editor-in-chief of Football Outsiders, where our new slogan is Football Lives Here. And we know football lives in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And that is where one of today's guests is. Aaron Nagler from CheeseheadTV is joining us today to preview the Football Outsiders Almanac chapter on the Green Bay Packers. We will also be talking about the Detroit Lions later in the show. Derrik Klassen is here as well. He wrote those chapters. Don't forget that the Almanac is out now, and you can get it at Amazon, or you can get the electronic version with an FO Plus subscription, footballoutsiders.com/subscribe. And you want to get your FO Plus subscription now because our big early bird special sale, 20% off, goes until the end of the week, and then the prices go up. So get your FO Plus subscription now to get your electronic copy of the Almanac, all 550 pages roughly of football previews that are in this thing. All right, let's talk about the Green Bay Packers. Our question of the day is about the Green Bay Packers, and that is, who is going to be the number one receiver for the Green Bay Packers between Allen Lazard, Sammy Watkins, and Christian Watson? So I'll let the viewers make their choices in the poll. If you're listening afterwards on the podcast network, don't forget to watch us live at 1 p.m. Eastern, because then you can make comments on YouTube or Twitch and interact with us, ask questions. But let's ask Aaron first. Who do you think is wide receiver one for the Green Bay Packers this year?
Well, first of all, thanks a lot for having me on. Really excited to be with Football Outsiders. I've been watching and consuming your content for, over a decade and a half. So really honored that you asked me.
Oh, it doesn't get better. It doesn't get much better when it comes to Packers experts, man.
Well, that's really nice of you to say. As far as the question, I can't really put it in a poll type answer. If you're talking early in the season, it's probably Allen Lazard, but I don't think that remains steadfast throughout the season. I think a lot of it will be determined by who they're facing defensively and what type of scheme they're going against. And I do think there will be weeks where Sammy Watkins just goes off, provided obviously that he's healthy and stays on the field, which we all know has been the bugaboo the last few years. But I do think, between those two, you'll probably have some big games, but I don't think any one guy is going to step in and be wide receiver one. As far as Christian Watson, no question about it. You're really excited about the athleticism. The upside is definitely there. But, man, we all know. We heard Aaron this offseason talk about how he prefers production over potential. And we got to see him get on the field, get on the same page with Rodgers, his famous issues with trust and being in the right spot. And it's not just doing your homework. It's not just diving into the playbook, although that's a must. But it's also seeing the game the way Aaron does. So if you're at the line of scrimmage and Aaron sees something pre-snap and makes a slight adjustment, makes a call, what have you, you've got to not only get that call and know what the adjustment is, but then you've got to see the defense taken off from your stance and read what he's reading as far as here comes the safety rotation, and that's the outside leverage from the corner, so I know I got to make this break at 9 yards and blah, blah, blah. This all goes into it each and every snap, and it could be a run play that gets turned into a passing play. These are all the things that Watson and all these rookies are going to have to get on board with sooner rather than later if they're going to be in the conversation. I said, early, it's definitely Allen Lazard and Sammy Watkins. As the year goes on, I think we'll see more people get involved as the number one read.
That's obviously an issue for rookies with every team. Do you think it's a bigger issue with Rodgers than it is with other veteran quarterbacks?
I think I would suspect yes. I point back to these last couple of years. I've pointed back to an interview that MVS did with Ty Dunn for his website a couple off seasons ago, where MVS talked about the idea of, bring in a wide receiver or even draft a first-round wide receiver, which has obviously been a big narrative around Green Bay for years. But, he went on extensively about how it's just not that easy. It's not Madden. You don't just drop in and go. Now, clearly, MVS is about to play for his new NFL team in Kansas City, never been anywhere else, so he can't really speak to experiences in other NFL towns. But I suspect, it's probably at a slightly higher level when you've got the 4-time MVP who is running this offense now like it's second nature to him. I got to think there's a little bit more pressure on you as a wide receiver.
Derrik, what are your thoughts about the wide receivers in Green Bay this year?
I'm pretty much in lockstep with Aaron. I think like it's probably going to be Lazard early on, and like even down the stretch when other guys get involved, he'll probably have already gotten enough production early that he might just end the season with the most yards, catches, whatever. But I kind of suspect Lazard just because he has the most experience there. I think because he can do a number of things, I think that just kind of helps to Aaron's point about like they're going to have to change up what they do every week just because they don't have a true number one. But because Lazard can kind of be like this malleable, move around a little bit, do some different things, I think that actually helps his case a lot. I'm actually most interested to see how much work Randall Cobb actually gets because I think he was better than people realized.
Yes.
Last year, especially on like third downs and stuff, he was a really big point for Rodgers. So I don't think Cobb will necessarily fight for the number one job, but I am very interested to see how many of the reps he takes away from some other guys.
To that point, it's interesting if you go and watch the games where it's clear that they game planned with him in mind, right? Whether it's Pittsburgh game, the Rams game at home, both of those contests, he's featured pretty heavily in the passing game in the sense of he's a number one read on a lot of plays where that didn't happen much of the year. Now, I know he missed a good stretch of time, but to your point, yeah, when he's involved in the game plan, he's certainly produced. I mean, the Rams game in particular, I thought was almost like a textbook of how you want to use him.
He might be a sneaky good guy for DFS players to watch out for because he's probably going to come cheap and be underrated. I know, I've only done one fantasy draft so far this year, but in the Scott Fishbowl draft that I had, he was like my top guy left on my board for 2 or 3 rounds because people are sort of underestimating what he did when he was healthy last year.
I really think people just got in their minds like, oh, Randall Cobb went to Green Bay to play with his friend again. And like, we just forgot about like what he actually does as a player.
He actually did stuff while he was there.
Yeah, he actually did stuff.
Right.
H.E. Soder points out we need to think of it as receiving option number one rather than wide receiver number one. So Aaron Jones, how big a part of the passing game is he?
Yeah, Soder's a longtime CheeseheadTV fan, so good to see you, Soder.
Thanks to have you on our podcast, man.
I think he's obvious. I mean, I'm in absolute agreement there. I think Jones will maybe not explode in the sense of the passing game. I do think he and A.J. Dillon are going to be, in kind of lockstep as far as usage goes. But I do think Jones will be featured a whole lot in the passing game. All you got to do is look at the 7 games that Davante missed while Matt LaFleur was in town to see how much the running backs got involved in the passing game in Davante's absence. I don't think much changes in that regard. And I'm not talking like simple dump offs. I'm not even talking angle routes. I'm talking vertical routes. You go back and watch the 2020 game where they sat Davante down at the last minute. And there are plays in that game plan where they've literally got Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones running on 4 verts and completing big time conversions on third down deep, like 20 yards downfield. I don't think it's going to be a simple case of, we're going to run a screen or 2, although that will happen, but they are going to be used in the game, like vertically. There's no question.
The projection for the offense is 5th, which is a little down from last year where they were 2nd and they were 1st the year before in our DVOA numbers. And I think that's all just the loss of Davante Adams. I mean, normally when you lose a player who's that productive, you do go down a little bit. And I know that there's a lot of arguments have been made about both Green Bay and Kansas City. Strangely, I don't hear the same arguments about Tennessee, but I do hear them about Green Bay and Kansas City that they added enough like smaller pieces and the quarterback and the scheme are good enough that they won't miss that number one guy as much as you think they will.
Right.
I'm curious what your guys' take is on that idea.
I mean, I think when you have a quarterback that good, it is definitely true. When you have one of those 3, 4, 5 guys, like I think they can afford to lose, a Davante Adams. I mean, it still sucks, obviously. And like you said, they are still going to be worse. But if you can lose the literal best receiver in football and still be the 5th best offense in football, I think anybody who can pull that off would be very happy about being able to get away with that.
Right. I mean, I don't think there's any question the sense that, Aaron Rodgers papers over a lot, right? He's the best deodorant in football. There's no question about it. Now, that said, it's funny to me that people do such a big deal about losing Davante for obvious reasons. Like you said, best receiver in football. Of course, you're going to miss him. But the things that brought them kind of down last year weren't necessarily Davante byproducts, whether you're talking about early downs and their efficiency, especially in the run game, and making sure that they were staying ahead of the sticks, something they did outstandingly well in 2020, or their red zone efficiency. I mean, they completely fell off the map in the red zone last year in a way that was really surprising, given how easy things looked the previous season. Like, neither one of those were really Davante centric, but those are the things. Like, to me, a large part of that staying ahead of the sticks thing is staying healthy up front. I think that was a direct byproduct. But I do think those two things are the main things to look at with the Green Bay offense this year.
It's funny because we expect so much from Rodgers and so much from the Green Bay offense. They ranked 9th in DVOA in the red zone last year, and it feels like a fall off.
It was a fall off from the previous
overall
season,
they were second.
Yes, comparative to the rest of the league.
10.
Right.
I should point out, by the way, for people who are watching who may not normally watch the Football Outsiders live stream, who are Packers fans or Cheesehead TV watchers, you may be shocked at the graphic with our simulation from this year that we only have 9.3 average wins for the Packers. I point out our simulation is notoriously conservative, where everything groups around 500. And this year came out even more conservative than usual. Like, it's something I have to look at some point. Came out really conservative. So it's not actually that much lower than where they were last year. Last year, they were 8th in DVOA, and this year they're projected to be 11th. So it's not that much lower. What is controversial, I would think, for Packers fans is that we have the Vikings slightly ahead of the Packers, because while the Packers are better on offense, the Vikings are projected to be better on special teams with an easier schedule and similar defenses. The special teams, I think, we all expect it to be better because special teams
nowhere to go but up.
Nowhere to go but up, right? So, even though they're projected 32nd, they're not projected to be anywhere near as bad as they were last year. The defense is, I think, where a lot of the discussion has been, because I certainly said a couple months ago to a tweet, I think Mina Kimes tweeted about how the Packers could have a top 5 defense.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I don't see it based on their performance over the last couple of years. They've been a very average or slightly below average defense. Even a couple of years ago when Jair Alexander was healthy, even last year when Rashawn Gary was improved, and Kenny Clark's been there. It's not like Kenny Clark's new, like he's been there every year. And Devondre Campbell was there last year and played really, really well. And they were still kind of average. So let's talk about the defense. And I know, Derrik, you feel that the parts that they've added can come together to be more like the parts are more than the whole.
Yeah, I think it's just, for me in particular, I understand the cause for pessimism, just in the sense of, like, you can only expect rookies to do so much. But I think specifically with Quay Walker, he fundamentally changes like how the defense looks, because last year they could not play with a second linebacker. Like, they tried at certain points, but like Chris Barnes really couldn't do anything in coverage. So he was a liability anytime he was on the field. And then Oren Burks was the opposite, where he was kind of okay in coverage, but a complete liability against the run. I think because Walker kind of walks the line and does a little bit of both. If you watch him at Georgia, he was the guy that they were pushing out to cover against trips, to cover against the wide side of the field. When they needed a guy to cover, it was Walker. He was like the bridge between their insane pressure packages and all the cool stuff they were doing on the back end. He was like the glue that held it together. I think he can do a lot of that in Green Bay, because if you watch their defense last year, because of the way they emptied out the box in like the middle of the field, it put an unbelievable amount of stress on those safeties. And I think with a little more help from Walker and whatever they can get out of Davante Wyatt in terms of, potentially giving some more pressure, I think it just eases so much pressure off of those guys. And I think when they don't have so much on their mind, I think they're both really, really good playmakers when they have opportunities. So I think that's kind of just, I think there's just so many cascading effects from Walker, and then add that on top of, getting maybe the second best cornerback in football back. Pretty good, I think.
That's the thing. We tend to forget, I think, as this offseason goes on and you start looking at the numbers, right? They missed a significant amount of time with Jair Alexander last year.
Yeah.
And they missed an entire season with Zadarius Smith. Now, obviously, Zadarius has gone on to Minnesota, but I do think you look at the pieces and then you look at the additions. getting Rasul back, getting Devondre Campbell back, no question. They had to do that. I mean, to continue on and keep developing. And that's the other thing. You talk about, the last few years. Well, that's true. I'm not going to argue with you about whatever Mike Pettin was doing, but
right. I'm thinking more the last 2 years. Like I'm not going back 4 or 5.
I know. But Joe Barry's only been in town for 1 year, and that was a scheme change, and there were certainly issues, especially against the run. And I'll tell you what, you add Wyatt, you add John Reed, you start getting a little more stout up front. You're running those guys out there instead of Tyler Lancaster. I think you're going to be a little bit better on early downs. And then it all comes down to managing injuries, right? Because injuries are that's a fact of life in the NFL. Looking on paper right now here in late July, it's a really good defensive unit. Now, how are you going to respond if you do miss a stretch with Jair Alexander, or let's say Kenny Clark goes down for a little bit? Those, more than anything, will determine the Packers defense and their performance this year, because I think all their frontline guys, I'm absolutely sold on. The depth, that's where things get dicey. So if they start having to roll into their 4th, 5th corner or something, or, a deep pocketed outside linebacker group, of which there's just not a lot there, then yeah, there might be issues. But if they stay relatively healthy, this will be at least a top 10 unit. And yes, I think they'll be sniffing top 5.
I will say this about Douglas, which is I feel like, just like you have to remember that Jair Alexander is coming back and is really good, you have to temper your expectations for Douglas, because cornerbacks are notoriously inconsistent. And the year that he had last year is completely out of place in his career.
Right.
I know that, like, Derrik in the chapter gives some quotes that Douglas gave about feeling that this scheme helped him play better, and that might be a reason why he can continue to play at the level he played last year. But like, the level he played at last year is a level he had never played at before.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, you look at the fact that this is his 6th NFL team should tell you, like, okay, yeah, he really hasn't found a home until getting to Green Bay, and he certainly hit the ground running. I mean, they literally signed him that week when he made the big play to win the Arizona game. That's, most people don't just start like that. And then the back-to-back pick sixes in, subsequent weeks, which hadn't happened since like Herb Adderley was in town. So it's, he definitely announced his presence with authority. No question about it. It can be volatile as far as like a performance from a corner year after year. But I do think, again, developing the system, having Jair across from you for the majority of the time, or Stokes, if they kick Jair inside, which they probably will at times, I just think, man, it bodes well for him. And I think he's in the best spot he's been in the NFL. I don't expect pick sixes every week. I mean, I don't, that's even Charles Woodson couldn't do that. But I think his level of play, if he is just week in and week out, gives them what he gave them last year, as far as consistency, they'll be cooking with gas.
Stokes had a nice rookie year, by the way, and he's not somebody.
And I think an underappreciated
people outside of Green Bay are not really cognizant of him, because he wasn't like a super hyped prospect.
Well, exactly. He was late first round. The Rodgers drama last summer really kind of masked anything about their draft, let alone their first round pick. Because all the conversation was about Rodgers. So like Stokes is
also a player where like his bad plays just look horrific. And those are really easy to remember if you're only watching a few Packers games, whenever they're on primetime or whatever. But yeah, if you go back and watch his season, he was pretty good. Like he was one of the better, more productive rookie corners that we've seen in a long time, actually.
Yeah, you wish you would have liked to have seen him hold on to a few interceptions. I mean, I think there's one knock. That's the thing. He's
his
around
ball
the
skills are a little.
He which is funny because it's kind of like Jair Alexander in that way. Like Jair's kind of the same way. So as long as you're not giving up big plays, he did give up a few last year, but that's his rookie year, and he was playing a hell of a lot more than they ever expected him to because of the injury to Jair. So that those banked reps, that experience. Now he's in year 2. Love it for Green Bay.
And the last thing I would add on Douglas is like, he really just has to be a better player than Chandon Sullivan, which I don't think is a very high bar. And I think he can definitely do that.
I think you're onto something there. Yes, definitely.
MZ asks, will Savage get many interceptions? He had 2 last year.
If he can hold on to them.
Yes, that's another. There. Here's the thing. He made a number of big plays 2 years ago, right? And then they made the scheme change. And I don't know if it's because they play so much too high, what he's asked to do, etc. The big plays just didn't flow last year the way they had the previous season. That said, it's fascinating to me to watch kind of the narrative around Packers media and fans about, oh, he had a disappointing year. And I don't buy that. I think he was fine.
He was good.
Probably not as dynamic as you would have liked, especially considering his physical skills. But I do wonder, given what you were talking about earlier about Quay Walker, is he allowed to do a little bit more near the box? Because he, under Pettin, was so good. The closer he got to the line of scrimmage, the better his play became. I do wonder if there's more kind of mixing and matching, allowing Quay to take that seam stuff and giving Savage a few more opportunities to freelance, go get the football, etc. Here's hoping.
Nate Rodgers asks, what is more likely, Aaron Rodgers winning a third MVP in a row or TJ Watt winning the sack title for the third time in a row?
That's
honestly
an interesting question.
I think it's Aaron Rodgers.
I think it is too, and I think the reason is you would think initially like, oh, because he doesn't have Davante, it's going to be harder to win MVP. But now we already have it in our minds.
Votes.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
if he's like
it's
one of the
good.
top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the league, people will go, oh, and look what he did without it. Although
Exactly.
what we're going to end up doing is having this discussion about look what Aaron Rodgers did without Davante Adams versus look what Patrick Mahomes did.
Mahomes is doing without Tyreek Hill, 100%. Maybe they split the vote. Right? Maybe they get the merits because they're just so good that no one can decide between the two, which is entirely possible.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be tough for Watt to have that many sacks again, but doesn't need that many sacks to win the sack title. But I think you guys are right. I think it would be Rodgers by a little bit is more likely.
Just slightly. And I know I'm obviously sitting outside Lambeau Field and I am a total homer, but I just think it's probably the probabilities, probably Rodgers.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. Like Rodgers can get help narrative wise for the sack title. There's no narrative help.
Yeah, right.
No,
Exactly. It's pure numbers, right? Yep. Very true. Very true.
I will point out one of the reasons I voted for Rodgers last year over Brady was the idea that he overcame the injuries on his offensive line. So the last thing we should probably talk about
to that point, can I just say something that has not been talked about at all? Is exactly what you're talking about. And the sense, if you want an example of what Schatz is talking about here, go watch the Rams game. I mean, there are plays, especially on third down, where Aaron Donald and company are in his lap less than 2 seconds after the snap of the ball. And he's getting the ball out. He's completing passes on third down. It's an insane performance. And it's the type of stuff he was doing all year long that no one talks about.
Nijman, not
Josh
sure how
Nijman.
Yeah. Josh Nijman, he had a good year. Like he was a reasonable replacement.
I tell you what, when he had to start week 3, I thought they were dead, and he came in and really held his own. I was pleasantly surprised.
So what's the word around there? Like what's the word about Bakhtiari and about Elgin Jenkins as far as when they're coming back?
Yeah, well, Jenkins. I think the suspicion has always been we'll probably start on PUP, which this year is 4 weeks for the first time. I would be surprised if he's ready for week 1. With Bakhtiari, I don't know, man. Like it's so disheartening to hear, to come in and see that he's been placed on PUP. I know there was a report from ESPN that he suffered some kind of setback during rehab, which is just awful considering everything he went through last year trying to get back on the field. I really got to wait and hear whatever Matt has to say tomorrow and Brian. I mean, there's no scuttlebutt about anything when it comes to Dave's health that can get out of anyone. I think the Packers are always going to be conservative, right? They are notoriously conservative. And when I talked to David for an interview at the end of last season, he kind of wanted to get his, kind of story out there as far as why he missed an entire year. And he talked about Doc McKenzie, the Packers doctor, saying, we don't want you back for 3 games. We want you back for 3 years, is the quote that he used. And I was like, that tracks with how the Packers operate. Whatever Martellus Bennett may tell you, they always err on the side of caution. So I hope, as Packers fans are hoping, that this is just more of that, and that at some point in camp he comes off PUP and is at least in the conversation for week 1. But we'll start to know more tomorrow.
Dr. Dazzle asks, would they start 1 and 2 after 3 games? They have a sort of a hard start. Which of the away games is a win? They start with at Minnesota, Chicago at home, and then at Tampa Bay. And listen, as much as we're higher on Minnesota than anybody else, I would think that if they're going to win one of those 2 away games, it's going to be at Minnesota. And by the way, the schedule gets a lot easier after that with Patriots, Giants, Jets.
Although Giants is in London, anything can happen. And then coming back from London, you play right away. Lots of times teams get a bye week coming back from London. The Packers declined that and decided we want to play right away. And so they're playing the Jets coming off that jet lag trip. So who knows? I'm just saying.
It's not any more jet lag than going from Los Angeles to New York.
I know. Well, it's a little bit. But I will say, as far as that 1 and 2 question, I think it's an excellent question. I'm with you. I think 100% more likely W is in Minnesota, simply because of, the teams being evenly matched. And I think the problem down in Tampa, the Packers have just never performed well down in Florida. It's some kind of bugaboo. Rodgers is part of that too. He just has not played well. Not played well against that defense. It's been a house of horrors. Maybe not having Davante forces him to spread it around. Maybe Matt LaFleur says, hey, we should maybe try to run the ball a little bit instead of throw it all over the yard against this incredible pass rush. Who knows? I don't know. We'll see. But, to me, Minnesota is the more likely of the two.
One more. MZ says Bakhtiari mentioned it was Rodgers who wanted him to get some reps, and then Bakhtiari had a setback. Did he play just because Rodgers wanted him to?
No, I know Rodgers put that out there on McAfee. Clearly, Rodgers wanted him out there. There's no doubt about it. But that was very much a discussion within the entire kind of football part of the organization, right?
Right.
There's no doubt that Bakhtiari was feeling the issue with his knee all year long. And at some point, they were getting ready for the playoffs, and he knew and he said this in the interview, and it wasn't so much like there was anything said, but he could feel that coaches wanted to see him out there. Personnel people were like, should we bring someone in, etc. And he felt kind of duty bound, honor bound, so to speak, to show people, okay, this is, I can do this. And he didn't necessarily suffer a setback in that game. It's just the fluid issue that he was dealing with all year long just kept popping up. So it wasn't in the sense of like something popped or something tore or something, you know what I mean? Like it was just a continuation of what he'd been dealing with all year long. I mean, don't forget, as he told me, he had his knee drained over 15 times last year. 15 times in one season. I tell you to go YouTube, knee drainage, but it's disgusting and I don't want to ruin your lunch. But it is, it was just a really unfortunate kind of situation with Dave. And it sure sounds like it might be something they're dealing with for a while here in Green Bay.
Does Julio Jones, Bryce Waltz asks, does Julio Jones seem like a good fit for the Packers maybe closer to the end of the year? I don't know how much Julio Jones has left at this point.
I mean, hasn't been healthy since 2018. I get the name value, right? But, man, for the 2 games he'd play, I'm sure it'd be fun, but I just don't see Green Bay operating that way. I would be absolutely shocked if they went that route. Now, OBJ, I think there's a chance.
Makes way more sense as a second half pick.
And they were interested last year. We know that. And I think that makes a world of sense. But that'll surprise me because I don't think OBJ really wants to play in Green Bay. I think he wants to go back to LA and live that LA life. And he doesn't want to be hanging out in Shawano. He wants to be out in LA. So who knows? Maybe the Packers make that move. It's possible. But of the 2, OBJ is way more possible.
All right. Thank you so much. Aaron Nagler, CheeseheadTV is his website, live from Green Bay, bringing us all the Packers information on the Packers' upcoming season. Thanks for helping us preview the team, man. It's really good to have you on.
Absolutely. And thanks for the Almanac, man. It is so great. And you didn't even send it to me this year. I went and just got it with my FO subscription. I geek out on that thing. And the moment you guys say it's coming, then it's out, I have to download it every year within the first 30 seconds it's available. It is
another satisfied customer.
I love it, man. I love it. Thanks so much for having me, dude.
All right, thanks for being on.
Take it easy.
All right, we're going to turn now and talk about another team from the NFC North that I think will surprise people how high we have them in our projections, even though when I say how high we have them, they're still not above 500 on average. But just the fact that they might be in it at the end of the season, the Detroit Lions are better than I think people realize. And part of it, I think, is that we're really big on the coaching staff and the job they did last year. Like Dan Campbell, all that aggressive stuff motivating guys in the locker room does count for something. There's no numbers on it. I mean, you want numbers. He was aggressive on fourth down, so there's a good number. But I mean, as far as the let's rip their kneecap stuff off, I do think that matters. He's got guys who want to play for him. And so Detroit, they don't project to be above average on either offense or defense, but since they have an easy schedule, if they're just a little bit better than their average projection, they could be 9-8 and be in the playoff race. They make the playoffs in 35% of our simulations.
The thing about Dan Campbell's attitude or whatever is that usually when guys are that weird rah, we're gonna bite kneecaps or whatever, usually just means they're gonna run the ball and maybe blitz a lot or something. That's what you would think of with aggression. But with Campbell, it actually manifested, like you said, in coaching decisions and not punting, going for it on fourth downs, just stuff like that. So I think if they keep that up, that is a huge thing for them, because when you are typically the underdog, I think those things are, they become even more valuable. I mean, the fact that they stayed in the Rams game for as long as they did is truly unbelievable. Probably a little lucky, but those are the things that you have to do when you are kind of on the back foot. But yeah, like you said, I still generally really like this team. The coaching staff is good, and I think the offense has a lot more stable ground to stand on than I think people realize. They had no explosiveness last year, especially, with DeAndre Swift being a little bit in and out with injuries and stuff. But the stability that they're working with in terms of the offensive line, the guys they have projected to start, 2 good tackles, a really good center. The guard play is a little questionable, but I think with Ragno back in the lineup, those 2 guys should be better.
We got some questions when we did the tier list show on the offensive line that we did the Lions too low. And I think we talked about it, and we all sort of agreed that we could definitely see us coming back a year from now and going, oh yeah, we did this too low. Because Ragnow in particular, Ragnow missed, most of last year. He's very good.
Especially on the ground, which actually I think was their bigger problem. Because I think their interior in terms of, the ground game was just not good. I think Evan Brown was their center last year. Not very good on the ground game. Jonah Jackson, one of their other guards, I have never really been that impressed with him as a run blocker, even though I think he's a fine pass blocker. So I think getting Ragno back, who is not one of just the best centers, period, but specifically as a run blocker, really, really, really good. I think that could go a long way for kind of unlocking the run game, which I think in turn is really important for Goff, who is one of those, play action structure type of quarterbacks. I think that would help him a lot. And then you add on, some of the stuff they did with adding receiver talent. The offense can be not bad.
Before last year, DJ Chark was one of those guys that we talked about as, boy, this guy's got a lot of talent. If we just got him on a team with a good quarterback, imagine what he could do. Now, he's still not on one, but
he's closer than he was.
The injury made us all forget how good he is. And then we don't know when Jamison Williams is going to play and how good he's going to be, because he's got to recover from ACL. So even if he's ready to get on the field, he as fast as he usually is. But if he plays the second half of the year, now Amon-Ra St. Brown is the third receiver. That's a pretty darn good third receiver. Yeah, their offense could be reasonable. And
Goff is Goff has issues with standing in the pocket too long, but I think with this offensive line, that can be quelled a little bit. His processing can be a little slow at times, but if he can get pointed in the right direction, he's a really accurate thrower. And I think if they have more guys who are going to be open, more options to kind of scheme this stuff up, he could be reasonably productive. I mean, wasn't he 20th in DVOA last year or something?
He was at minus 3.6%. So yeah, just a little bit below average, roughly about 20th. Yeah.
And if we assume, the offensive line and the receivers are going to be better, I don't think it's that unreasonable that he could be average or slightly better. Yeah. That's about what he is in his, the standard middle version of Goff is an average quarterback, maybe slightly above if you have good options.
And then the defense is packed with guys that we feel are hey, sneaky, useful guys that you don't realize. There are 3 of them, I think, on the top 25 prospects list. Derek Barnes, the linebacker, and then Julian Akwara, and I'm trying to remember who the third one is. But there's also the defensive tackle Levi Onwuzurike, who didn't qualify for the top prospects list because you have to be third round or lower. He's a second rounder, but he's another guy who you really like. And Alim McNeil
also
is another young guy with talent who's sort of like not someone who people don't talk about. Oh, Detroit has all these good young guys, but Detroit has a good amount of good young guys, not even looking at Aiden Hutchinson, who a lot of us felt should have been like the number 1 pick in the draft.
The problem really with their defense is just they don't have like a star that they can kind of hinge everything off of. But yeah, to your point, they have a lot of guys who like other teams would be happy starting these guys. Like honestly, Charles Harris was, I think, a lot better than people realized last year. The 2 tackles you mentioned, I think, were better than people realized. Like, I mean, the biggest problem really to me is just corner.
If they could get like a big next year's draft, get a top corner in next year's draft, and Hutchinson turns into the guy we think Hutchinson can be, those other pieces are good enough that this could be a top defense if they had those 2 pieces set.
100%. And like at corner, like maybe Jeff Okudah can do something because, he was hurt for most of last year. And I do think Aaron Glenn is like a really, really, really good defensive backs coach. So if there was going to be anywhere he could figure this out, it would be here. Obviously, we don't know. But yeah, outside of him, it's just like they really just have Amani Oruwariye, who is like the Diet Coke version of Trevon Diggs, basically. And then they signed Mike Hughes, who gave up a ton of big plays last year. So I don't know. I still have worries about the corners, but they have a lot of like solid to good pieces in the front 7. And I think that can probably be enough to be like a not disastrous defense. I think especially in this division where you're going to get a lot of teams being, heavier in their personnel and running the ball a lot. I think that's probably like a decent scenario for them.
H.E. Soder says, who is going to generate pressure? I mean, Charles Harris sort of came back from being the disappearing act of his career, and I don't know how much you can trust him. But look, Aiden Hutchinson should be good. And then there's the Okwara brothers, and then there's Josh Pascal, and they've got some pass rush.
I think they have like a good like 2 deep. They just don't have a star. But I think that was kind of what the Bills were last year. I don't know if they're quite.
And Hutchinson's supposed to be the star. The question is just how long does it take for him to be the star, right? Is he the star right away?
It probably won't be this year.
2024,
Exactly. So yeah, I do like their 2 deep though. Like I think, yeah, even when you go down into the Aquaras, Josh Pascal is like a really, really good. He's more of a pocket pusher type than somebody who's going to actually.
I will point out Zach Sear, if I remember correctly, he did very low in sacks here. He did not.
Yeah, he's more of like, I think I put this in the chapter. He's more of like a Trey Flowers, where he is just pushing the pocket a lot and kind of causing a lot of disruption. But I think if they start to blitz more this year, especially on first and second down, he could actually be really, really valuable in terms of generating space that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are a lot of interesting pieces here. Like the defensive projection for them is not good, but there are pieces where you're like, if you look at these guys and then you look at Aaron Glenn as the defensive coordinator and the way people believe in him, this is one of those defensive turnarounds that it would make narrative sense. It's not likely, but it would make narrative sense. And if you had an average offense and a defensive turnaround, now the Lions are a real team.
And they also signed Deshaun Elliott at safety, who I think is not a very like sexy name at safety, but if you watch him in Baltimore, he did a very good job of just being where he needed to be on time and like kind of helping facilitate the rest of that scheme. Obviously, they had so many injuries at cornerback that it didn't really matter last year, but I think in general he's done a good job of like being a kind of Band-Aid on the back end. And Lord knows the Lions really, really needed somebody like that last year.
Yeah, I last year I was very big on the Lions over, and I was wrong. They didn't get it, and I apologize for not looking up what the number is. But once again, I'm big on the Lions over. Like I feel like this team is better than people realize. Not good. Like I don't feel like they're going to be a playoff contender. But
they'll still be on that graphic late November. They'll still be on the graphic.
Yeah, they're right. They're 3-13-1. They're not going 3-13-1 again. And the difference is we wrote about the Houston Texans, that the Houston Texans are built to be on the still in it graphic in week 14. Detroit may be on that graphic in week 14, but they're not building towards that. They're building towards something better. They need They need a quarterback and a cornerback.
Yep. And hopefully next year they can. That's the funny thing about the Lions this year is they might play themselves out of the quarterback pick, but
yeah,
I still am always of the belief like just compete and then the chips will fall where they may. I mean, quarterback drafting is kind of crapshoot anyway. So, and they truthfully probably would still have like ammo to potentially move up if they really, really wanted a guy. So I think they'll be able to get their chance anyway.
Yeah. All right. That's our look at the Detroit Lions. 8 mean wins, surprisingly high, but restore the roar. # restore the roar. Football Outsiders Almanac 2022. Once again, want to remind everybody it is out now. Go to Amazon.com to pick up a physical copy. Go to footballoutsiders.com/subscribe to get your electronic copy by becoming an FO Plus subscriber. And again, the early bird special ends at the end of the month. So if you want 20% off and get all the stuff that comes with an FO Plus subscription, not just the book, but the Kubiak fantasy draft tool, the weekly fantasy projections during the season, all the fantasy research tools, all the DVOA database going back to 1981, including all the stuff for the current year, which will help you with fantasy football and DFS. Thank you so much to everybody who watches the show today. Thank you for all the comments and questions. Thank you to everybody listening on the Football Outsiders Podcast Network. Please do not forget to like and subscribe to the show because I'm about to drop a schedule change on you. We will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern to talk about the Minnesota Vikings with Matthew Collar from Purple Insider, as well as the Chicago Bears. Derek and I will be back tomorrow, not Thursday. I have to take Thursday off this week. So we are doing the show tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. So be there for Minnesota and Chicago. And until then, thank you for watching and listening, folks.